An hour-and-a-half drive deeper into the mountains is another area that feels threatened, but for a much different reason. The isolated Albanian town of Kruma has been through 2 invasions and now fears a third. First, in March, came the ethnic Albanians fleeing from across the border that more than doubled the small city's population. Then came the Kosovo Liberation Army, whose soldiers now occupy buildings and have set up checkpoints, using Kruma as a command and logistics center for fighting the Serbs in Kosovo. When the refugees arrived in Kruma, people took them in. When the KLA arrived, they began to get nervous. But it's what came next that pushed them over the edge. Serb shells that fell on the town Monday evening sent Kruma into chaos. Now the town and its officials feel trapped between an army of refugees and an army of guerrillas. Angry residents, fearful one or perhaps both, may bring more Serb shells. After the shelling, the people here are very upset, he says. And because of this, I've informed the president and prime minister, and I've asked them to do as much as they can to protect civilians. Residents are not the only ones concerned about deteriorating security along the border. The UN is urging refugees to leave as soon as possible.
The security situation here is worrisome, so we've come up with buses today to see how many people might want to move right away today.
So as the refugees boarded buses to safety and the KLA freely roam the streets, the people of Kruma can only stand by and watch both, wondering what or who will come next. Martin Savage, CNN, Kruma, Albania.
Avkovic fuzzed things up further when he said no troops from countries participating in the bombing could enter Kosovo. That seems to eliminate the U.S., British, French, and German forces. The general also signaled he wants to keep at least 10,000 Serb troops in Kosovo. The G8 says all Serb forces are to be withdrawn. All of this ambiguity and confusion made NATO officials suspicious of President Milosevic's offer.
Now we're hearing claims that he's accepted the principles established by the G8 nations, that his track record leads us to one conclusion, that we must not and we cannot trust his word.
President Milosevic,
Yugoslavia's President Slobodan Milosevic is an indicted war criminal, but now there's the first hard evidence that won't slow down Russian, European, and U.S. diplomatic efforts aimed at working out a deal with him.
As far as those going in to make the case for accepting the NATO conditions, we think that can be useful.
Following a meeting in Bonn with U.S. and German officials, Finland's President Martti Ahtisaari announced he will travel with Russian envoy Viktor Chernomyrdin to Belgrade Wednesday. Ahtisaari, who represents the European Union, says the ball is now in Mr. Milosevic's court.
I think we have come now to the point when the clarity has to be sought from the Yugoslav end.
The German chancellor says diplomacy is moving in the right direction.
I think that we have managed substantial progress.
The Russian envoy agrees.
We hope we will find a solution, or at least we'll be looking for a solution to solve this conflict.
Yugoslavia says it accepts the general principles for peace put forward by the 7 major industrialized nations, plus Russia. But there's no agreement on the details. In a letter to the European Union, Foreign Minister Zhivatin Jovanovic says those principles can include a United Nations presence in Kosovo. But that's not good enough for the NATO allies, who insist any peacekeeping force must be led by NATO.
I think that it's important for there to be an explanation by Milosevic as to what it is he means.
In the meantime, NATO leaders promise there won't be any pause in the airstrikes.
It is the damage to the Serb military machine which drives Milosevic towards NATO's key demands.
U.S. officials say Chernomyrdin will be the good cop and Ahtisaari the bad cop during the talks with Mr. Milosevic. They also say they want the Finnish president to provide a second opinion about how far Mr. Milosevic will go. Wolf Blitzer, CNN, the White House.
Fiber made the trip at the request of President Clinton. In Macedonia, there are more than 300,000 ethnic Albanian refugees from Kosovo. Wiesel blamed Yugoslav President Milosevic for the humanitarian crisis. Wiesel also criticized the West for not intervening in Kosovo sooner.
It was the evening of March the 24th, shortly before 8, when NATO jets took off for their first missions against military targets in Yugoslavia. Since then, there have been over 25,000 sorties. NATO says over 14,000 were bombing raids aimed at degrading infrastructure and cutting supply routes. Most of Yugoslavia's main bridges have been destroyed. By late May, the number of aircraft in the air, night and day, had risen to 1,000, 3 times more than at the beginning of the NATO operation. Most of the aircraft take off from bases in Italy. Others come from further afield, such as Germany. In May, NATO began launching missions from Hungary. The US Air Force has stationed Apache helicopters in Albania, although these haven't seen action. Other fighter aircraft have been taking off from 3 aircraft carriers in the Adriatic Sea. NATO has also made extensive use of Tomahawk missiles. Tomahawks are among the US's most often used armaments. Once fired, they can travel up to 2,000 kilometers and strike within 30 meters of their target. Many Yugoslavian military sites have been destroyed by this weapon, but supplies are running low. The Alliance's ECR Tornado fighters are also equipped with state-of-the-art technology. The German jet specializes in locating and destroying enemy radar installations. Its weapon system is mainly responsible for destroying the greater part of Yugoslavia's fixed-air defenses. The US has contributed 630 aircraft, the largest share of the Alliance's air fleet. Among them, the Thunderbolt, designed to take on ground troops. The low-flying fighter has caused severe damage to Serbian tanks and artillery.
Forza fra diplomazia ed apparato militare per vedere chi arriva primo alla soluzione della crisi Kosovo. La NATO colpisce con sempre maggiore durezza ed aumentando le incursioni aeree aumentano gli errori. Novi Pazar, bomba fuori bersaglio, almeno 23 morti fra i civili, denuncia Belgrado. La NATO ammette l'errore. Contestazioni invece per la strage di Surdulica. I 20 morti nell'ospizio li abbiamo visti, ma la NATO sostiene ancora di aver puntato ad un obiettivo militare. Anche le bugie sembrano in gara fra di loro. Aereo NATO abbattuto, ci propone la TV serba. Saremo più o meno al centesimo. Se fosse...
Has confirmed that its aircraft dropped bombs on Albanian positions on the Albanian side of the Kosovo border. The spokesman said it happened during attacks on Serb forces in the border area. He said a small Albanian bunker near the border crossing point of Marini was damaged, but no one was hurt. Albanian soldiers and villagers in the area fled under several waves of attacks. Our correspondent Jeremy Cook witnessed the NATO bombing.
Expectation and apprehension grew throughout the day in Bonn as Chancellor Schröder arrived to chair talks that might, just might, bring a breakthrough in Kosovo. As they posed for photographers, the Russian envoy Viktor Chernomyrdin and the European Union's envoy Martti Ahtisaari of Finland remained diplomatically silent. They later admitted that they still don't agree 100% on all details of the plan they'll take tomorrow to Belgrade. They'll talk into the night to hammer out the finer points. During a pause in today's talks, Mr. Schröder said there was no reason for euphoria, despite what he called substantial progress. The main stumbling block remains whether the envoys can persuade Mr. Milosevic to accept NATO troops as part of a peacekeeping force in Kosovo.
NATO switches off the power day after day and night after night. There's starting to be real hope that a peace settlement could be in sight. Maybe it is, but the evidence is more slender than most people here like to think. On television tonight, for instance, there was a statement from General Pavkovic, the Serbian commander in Kosovo. He said he'd met President Milosevic and had high hopes of a political settlement tomorrow. But he made it absolutely clear the two big questions, a Serbian withdrawal from Kosovo and the make-up of an international peace force, had still not been settled. Until they are, NATO's pressure will continue remorselessly. It's affecting everything. Usually there are 800 buses on the road in Belgrade. Now there are only 300 because of fuel shortages. Worst of all is the bombing, of course. Today in the town of Surdulica, they were burying some of the victims from yesterday's accidental strike on an old people's home and a sanatorium. Not that many people here think these things are accidental. Most seem to believe that NATO deliberately targets civilians for a clear political reason.
Let's push the people so the people can push our government to sign. It's very simple.
A lot of innocent people are being dead, and nothing can replace that. So I think it's not the question if they did it on purpose or not. It's the question that new life cannot be replaced.
Conditions here aren't, of course, anything like as bad as Serbian forces have inflicted on other people. But in a sophisticated place like Belgrade, the effects are harsh. The Muratovic family, for instance, find their whole life has been turned upside down. There's no power for days at a time. None of the things modern people rely on work. So their day ends in the early evening.
From 6 o'clock when it is dark, and we sleep all night. It's okay, we can do. Maybe electricity comes sometimes at night, and then we jump and wash dishes.
Prepare something.
So everyone here is longing for the war to end. But in this country, one man alone can make it happen. We may find out tomorrow whether President Milosevic really will give in and accept NATO's demands, or whether all the talk about peace is just an attempt to divide his enemies. John Simpson, BBC News, Belgrade.
Overnight attacked power and fuel supplies in Yugoslavia. There was also heavy bombing in southern Kosovo. Belgrade and Novi Sad were also hit, and NATO planes apparently attacking Serb artillery positions in Kosovo crossed the border and bombed positions inside Albania.
It is the best diplomatic bet yet to stop the bombs, but Europe's Balkans envoy has spelt out that clarity over what is required and not compromise is the main purpose of his mission.
I don't necessarily think that we need to bring anything new. But I think it is important that I stand ready to clarify, answer questions on the basis of those principles that are well known.
Confirmation of the joint EU-Russian peace initiative came after talks in Bonn. The German Chancellor said euphoria wasn't appropriate, but substantial progress had been made. Even if there is now something resembling a common front, America has issued a reminder that most still depends on Yugoslavia's President Milosevic.
We have heard Milosevic has said that he accepts the G8 principles, but it is unclear yet what that means I mean, that's not enough. Just saying the G8 principles, and certainly that's not enough because we have been talking about the NATO 5 conditions. So I think that it's important for there to be an explanation.
The G8 principles, which President Milosevic apparently accepts, include an end to repression in Kosovo, the withdrawal from there of military, police and paramilitary forces, and the deployment of an effective international civil and military presence. But Belgrade has so far balked at NATO's separate insistence that the alliance play a major part in any peacekeeping force. It doesn't want the so-called aggressor countries there, but German diplomats have said President Milosevic may find that Russia's position on the overall issue has changed. While differences remain, the suggestion now is that Serbia's principal ally is coming to accept that NATO forces will have to be involved. Despite diplomacy, NATO's intensive bombing has continued overnight. Targets in Belgrade, Novi Sad and in Prizren have all been attacked. It was also reported that the Yugoslav Air Force Deputy Chief of Staff had been killed while inspecting troops, although no more details were forthcoming. But relentless round-the-clock strikes are also giving the alliance more explaining to do. The mistaken raids over Albania, in a militarized border area used by fleeing refugees, emphasize the ongoing dangers of bombing President Milosevic into submission. Paul Royal, BBC News.
Within the last few minutes, the International Court of Justice in The Hague has rejected a Yugoslav petition to order an end to the NATO airstrikes. Live now to...
The paper clearly.
You want more details?
Yes.
Such as?